Good evening, you're watching News Now and I'm Sumita Khari. Let's start this show with the breaking news right now. Well, the Finance Minister is presenting a white paper on the Indian economy to contrast the condition of the Indian economy during the UPA years with the NDA years, that is from the years 2014 till 2024. In fact, reports were claiming that the ongoing budget session of the Parliament was extended for this very reason by a day. Remember, this is something that the government had announced during the interim budget also, that such a paper would be presented to compare the economic performance of the years of the Congress-led UPA along with that of the NDA government led by the BJP. Remember, like I said, the Finance Minister had stated this. In fact, Prime Minister Modi also sailed through the opposition in Parliament, stating that during the UPA years, when the economy was growing at a rate of 11%, there was so much of optimism about India being a bright spot in the global economy. So definitely there is no reason for negativity when the economy now is the fifth largest and well on its way to become the third largest. So the past few days, we've really seen these heated debates in Parliament. In fact, the Prime Minister speaking on multiple occasions as far as the Indian economy is concerned and its growth trajectory is concerned. We also saw the RBI governor today, presenting the repo rate policy, stating that the country is well on its way. In fact, he shared the projections for FY25 growth at well above 7%. He also stated that inflation has moderated. In fact, there was no change in the repo rate stance as well. In fact, we've seen a lot of investments also come into the Indian economy. So that white paper being presented right now, of course, the opposition has been searing through the government, has been targeting the government, questioning the timing of bringing out this white paper. Remember, earlier in the day, Mallikarjun Kharge, a Congress leader, and several others from the opposition, they brought out a black paper, which, of course, the Prime Minister dismissed during his speech in the Parliament. We'll, of course, be joined by more guests to dissect this white paper and what this really has in just a short while from now. All right, so we're joined by Neerja Chaudhary, who's joining us now, political commentator and columnist. Thank you very much, ma'am, for joining us this evening when we're presenting this special broadcast on the white paper that's being presented by the government. What is your take on this, and how do you really assess this move coming in just ahead of elections? How much of an impact will this really have on voters?
Look, I think, this is a new tool for elections. White paper versus black paper, how the economy did during UPA's time, and the Congress counters on the same day. Congress is normally very slow on the uptake. Same day on coming out with a black paper on how badly the Modi government has done on the economy. So both trade charges. I'm reminded of 1993, early 1993, when after the demolition of the Babri Masjid, in 1992, the government had come out with a white paper blaming the BJP for what had happened, all that had gone wrong. And then the BJP came out with a white paper blaming the government for what had gone wrong. So, but that time was not near the elections. State elections were a few months down the line. This is only now a few weeks down the line. And both sides, the Prime Minister has been very, very in an attack mode, taking on the Congress in particular, not so much the regional parties, and therefore, the Congress ruled for 10 years and all that went wrong and what they inherited in 2014, and the Congress countering with the black paper. So as I say, it's a paper versus paper, and a paper, before the election campaign, a paper ploy, white paper and black paper ploy, no tools in election campaigning.
Ma'am, so you are saying that these are just new tools that are being invented by governments. Before that, it was the Congress government that really came out with such a white paper, and now it's the BJP-led NDA that's really coming out with a white paper. But ma'am, this is actually based in some facts, as the white paper claims. We've seen inflation really moderated. We've seen global brands really endorse brand India. In fact, the IMF just a few days back stated that India is in fact growing at a faster pace than many of the economies of the Western world.
Yeah, we will see. It will be very interesting to study the two papers and see what are the specific charges that are being made, the information, the data that is being, figures that have been given to support their charges. Absolutely. But I'll say, and of course, how the Congress has already said that it's a, Rahul Gandhi said it's a heap of lies, the charges being created by the BJP. But I would say one thing, with both sides coming
Sure.
out with
I
their
have to
arguments,
interject you
both
when you
sides
say
coming out with the data, for us as citizens and voters, it is very good to get this information so that we can make up our minds.
absolutely, 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 ma'am. Ma'am, I also want a question from you now on your assessment of how the opposition really has behaved. You have Mallikarjun Kharge, along with other senior Congress and opposition leaders, really saying that this is a black paper. That was, of course, badgered by the Prime Minister in the Parliament. What do you really make of this move by the Congress coming out with a black paper? And you know, if the government is really so confident of its facts, and if the nation has really seen what's happened with the Indian economy in the past few years, how do you really assess this government's the opposition's move of coming out with a black paper?
Look, it's a matter of, it could have been a white paper versus white paper. As I said in 1993, when they traded charges against each other. It's a manner of speaking, black paper, black deeds, black kartoot of the other side. That, I mean, it's as I say, part of political marketing, political attack. So also the BJP, the Prime Minister has been very sharp in his criticism in Parliament, and that shows it's a high-stake election. Very, very high-stake election, because the Prime Minister is all set for a third term and is likely to get it. But the opposition also knows it's very high stake for them. If they do very badly, then it's going to be existentialist crisis for several of these parties. So, of course, India as an alliance is not, it is not showing very signs of confidence at the moment. But Congress is hitting back. After a long time, the Congress seems to be getting its act together and at least hitting back with facts and figures and arguments.
Right, ma'am. Right, ma'am. I'll ask you to hold on to that thought. We have to cut across to Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, who actually spoke in Parliament on the white paper. You had Ms. Neerja Chaudhary actually saying that the Congress government, I beg your pardon, the Congress party and the opposition are coming back together after a while, with another political ploy, with what seems like a political ploy. But it will really, be interesting to see whether this, in fact, has an impact on the voter psyche during the general elections. But let's cut across to Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman and what she had to say in the Parliament.
Sir, I rise to lay a white paper on the Indian economy, both in Hindi and English versions.
Thank you.
All right, let's go across to my colleague Sumit Chaturvedi, who's standing by to give us some details, to give us the key highlights of what this white paper really has, when the government says that this is really in contrast, this is really presenting in contrast the economy during the UPA years versus the NDA years. Sumit, what do you have? What really has the government presented? What are the top highlights? Take us through them.
So overall, in budget this time, it was announced that white paper will be presented, and within a week, we have seen now this white paper is in the Parliament Lok Sabha. It broadly talks about certain points. Let me go through these points for you. Macroeconomic situation of India. It also talks about numerous scams. It talks about current status of various corruption scams of UPA government, and also how economy was turned around by NDA after they came to power in 2013. It also talks about healthy economy, what was there in 2004, was stagnant in 2014. Other points are, it also points out that UPA government inherited a healthy economy but made it a non-performing one. That's another point that has been broadly laid out. UPA leadership announced abandoned, in fact, 1991 reforms which they had undertaken under the PM Nirmala leadership, but they were abandoned after coming to power in 2004. So, including all these points, there are numerous points and very detailed points which have been discussed in the white paper. All facts have been given. Definitely, CEC has worked hard on that and brought to light all these the points which NDA government wants to make with regards to economy's performance from 2004 to 14 versus 2014 to 24 under the rule now. So a short while ago, I think the government has presented a white paper in Parliament in Lok Sabha.
Right, Sumit. So we were just a short while back speaking to Neerja Chaudhary, who's of course a political commentator, and she stated that these are new tools being invented by governments. Earlier, it was the Congress party which really floated a white paper when they were in power, and now the BJP just ahead of elections. So definitely timing is of essence here. But does this really do these white papers, etc., do these really tools of publicity have an impact on the voter's psyche?
Definitely, it's a part of the overall game plan, as it looks like, for attracting the vote bank only. NDA has brought to light what were the problems that were there in 2004 to 14 regime of UPA government. PM Modi, when he was asked 2 years ago, did he really want to bring a white paper on economy, he then said that we did not want to do because that would have shaken the confidence of foreign investors, foreign institutional investors, also other investors in India as well. That's why they did not bring it earlier. Now clearly we can see that with Lok Sabha elections are due in some months from now. It's clearly an attempt to further dent UPA's image when it comes to performing of the economy from 2004 to 14. The UPA also, in a way, today has brought out a black paper showing the problems with NDA's handling of economy. Though NDA government says that they had a crisis like COVID, which is unforeseen in history. What UPA was handling was the Lehman Brothers crisis, which was not that massive impactful crisis as COVID crisis was. So clearly, it's a white paper which is out in public domain in Parliament now.
All right. Thank you, Sumit, so much for joining us and giving us an overview of what that white paper really entails, and to give us more perspective on this white paper that the government has presented. Joining us now is Pooja Mehra, who's a journalist and, of course, a commentator. Thank you very much, Pooja, for joining us this evening on ET Now. I want to understand, do voters really need these black and white papers to judge their own financial condition and making up their minds? Pooja, please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Sorry, yeah. What I was saying is I'm not really sure what considerations voters act on, because I'm not a political journalist, I'm an economic journalist. So I can comment on what I think of the white paper, but it's difficult for me to say what voters take into consideration when they go and cast their votes or make their choices. Am I audible?
Surely, please go ahead and what you think of this white paper that's been presented. As far as the contents of this white paper go, how do you really assess the performance of NDA, and what do you really think of NDA's thoughts on handling the economy versus that of the UPA government?
So I think it's a very cleverly crafted white paper. Although it says it is being prepared by the Ministry of Finance, it is certainly not being prepared by any economists. It's been prepared clearly by some political staff in the ministry, because very clever things have been done. For instance, they have compared data for various things for the financial year 2013 with the current year. Although the Manmohan Singh government was in office till April 2014, so they should have taken the financial year 2014. But because their performance is not as good as it was in 2014, for instance, on fiscal deficit, the fiscal deficit was lower when Manmohan Singh passed on government to Mr. Modi. So they've done all these tricks. Although they say they've managed the rupee, or the rupee is performing better. The rupee, and they've given huge graphs. The rupee is actually, at a lower level right now than it was then. They say that, they talk at great length about handling of the economy in 2009 onwards. But in all of those years, the finance minister was Mr. Pranab Mukherjee, who they have awarded a Bharat Ratna. And Mr. Mukherjee himself wrote in his memoir that for many things that he was criticized by Mr. Modi's government, he took those decisions unilaterally. He For instance, retrospective taxation, for instance, delay in GST, which eventually was done by the Modi government. He writes in detail how the Prime Minister of that time, Dr. Manmohan Singh, was giving him advice, but he was not taking that advice and he was doing things on his own. So I don't know, this is not a very, apples for apples, oranges for oranges comparison. This is not a very objective comparison. This is not what I would expect by the economists in the finance ministry. But yeah, this is what you would expect to come out of the BJP. My own view on the handling of the economy is that I don't see a big difference in the handling of the economy between the UPA and the NDA. There has been a lot of continuity in policy. For instance, like they say, direct benefit transfers was started by the Manmohan Singh government. Naturally, any policy that starts over a period of time gains momentum and is going to become the reach is going to increase, and that is what has happened. In terms of all other comparisons, it's just a very, very political take. It's not a very robust economic take in my view.
So you're saying that it's a very, very political take, not really a robust economic take. But let me also quote from the white paper. It basically says that the fundamental decade of the UPA government failed to undertake economic, social and administrative reforms to strengthen India's long-term economic potential, despite the golden opportunity that was offered by years of high growth and investment. And, this is something that has often been brought up by experts as well, as far as some of the manufacturing sectors are concerned. For example, the semiconductor sector. Many experts say that, the UPA government did not really act fast as far as the semiconductor laying up of a foundation of semiconductors was concerned. What do you make of this stance that the government has mentioned in the white paper?
Let me turn around and say that the UPA, I don't prefer UPA government to NDA government or NDA government to UPA government, but just, since you ask a question to respond on basis of facts, let me say that the UPA government actually did very well on reducing import duties, and trade reforms, whereas the Narendra Modi government has kept import duties very high, which has been hurting India's global competitiveness for exports. And this is not something that I say. This is something that Dr. Arvind Panagria, somebody who was Niti Aayog vice chairperson, has been consistently writing about. So, I'm not sure. I mean, as a percentage of GDP, manufacturing GDP was higher during the Manmohan Singh government's time than it is during the Narendra Modi's government's time. So I'm not sure what reforms on manufacturing side we can discuss. Let's look at facts. Let's not look at rhetoric, I mean, as an economic journalist, I'm not going to go by rhetoric. I'm going to go by facts. And the fact is that manufacturing as a percentage of GDP was higher during the Manmohan Singh government's tenures than it has been in the tenures of the Narendra Modi government.
Okay. Let me also ask you another question on inflation. The charge really is that inflation also shot up during the UPA regime and now it has moderated. How do you really read that para?
Yes, on inflation, the record is much better during the Narendra Modi government's tenures than it was during the Manmohan Singh government's tenure. But we must not forget that the inflation targeting regime, that reform was designed and that report was written during the Manmohan Singh government's time, and it has been implemented by this government because the Manmohan Singh government took a call that, since the report, the proposal became final towards the fag end of their tenure, so it is a decision for the next government to take. So, yes, this government is, the inflation performance during this government's time has been better, but it is a result of a reform which was started by the previous government. We can't deny that also.
So you're saying that, of course, the government has performed better as far as controlling inflation. Yeah, go ahead.
There are many other things. So there are some things that the Modi government has done better on, and there are some things that the Manmohan Singh government, should probably be given credit. For instance, the tax GDP ratio has just now begun to look a lot better than it has in the last 15 years, not only in relative to the Manmohan Singh government's tenure. There are many such comparisons that can be drawn. It's really difficult to say which of the two governments is better. My take is that India can do a lot better. Different governments, if they stop focusing as much as they do on politics and populism and begin to do economic reforms, things could get a lot better. And I also want to say that, the disruptive politics, during the Manmohan Singh government's time, the GST could have been implemented, but it was not because there was opposition from the BJP. During the BJP government's time, farm laws had to be repealed by Parliament, although, they were very much in line with what the Congress had written in their manifesto and what the Congress government in the Punjab state had been discussing. Different political parties, obstruct reforms by sitting governments. Politics is in general not good, I feel, for the economy. And if everybody could stop comparing with the previous government and just focus on getting the job done and getting reforms done, wouldn't that be so much better? But I suppose that's wishful thinking.
Right, Pooja, I have to ask you another question on, what the government really calls as the mismanagement of public finances. The government says in the white paper that the UPA government's response to the global financial crisis in 2008, fiscal stimulus package to combat the spillover effects was much worse than the problem it actually sought to address. And this time, they compared this time that India has really, not really been affected by the global slowing down of economies in the Western markets. How do you read that?
I don't think the fiscal management was good by the Manmohan Singh government at all. The fiscal deficit climbed up to, at the highest point, I think 6.5% of GDP. Fiscal deficit climbed up to more than 9% during the time of the Narendra Modi government on their handling of COVID. The difference is that with the 6.5% fiscal deficit, the Manmohan Singh government delivered a much faster GDP growth rate than this government is delivering. The difference also is that the Manmohan Singh government very quickly compressed very sharply and brought it down to under 5%, the fiscal deficit in 2014. And this government is not going to be able to bring it under 5% even for the next 2 years. So they are slow. And one more thing, I don't think Manmohan Singh government did well on fiscal management, and I don't think this government has done well in fiscal management as well as they could have. And one of the main reasons I think that is, that the FRBM Act's escape clause was invoked before COVID even struck. That was done in the year 2019. And fiscal management was so bad that the target for eliminating the revenue deficit was deleted through an amendment to the FRBM Act by this government. So they don't even have that target anymore now. In general, I feel since 1991, hardly any government has done well on fiscal management. Fiscal deficit should have been 3%, regardless of what shocks, whether it is COVID, global financial crisis, the East Asian crisis, whatever it is, we are not on track to get to 3%, and all governments must share blame for that. To single out one government, even if you look at the data, is very difficult to do, unless you're politically biased one way or the other.
All right. So you are saying that as far as the fiscal handling of the economy, both the NDA government and the UPA government have not really done well. However, you are saying that this government has done rather well as far as inflation is concerned. And of course, the white paper stating a whole lot of facts as far as manufacturing is concerned, as far as, moving out of a global financial crisis is concerned, especially at the time when the Western economies are slowing. India relatively has been untouched. Thank you for sharing your perspectives, Pooja. Appreciate you joining us here this evening on ET Now. So on that note, we're going to slip into a quick break, but lots more news coming up on the other side. Do stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. Join us here back on ET Now. And you are with us on a special broadcast on the government presenting a white paper on the state of the economy during the NDA years versus those of UPA years. The government has, presented a seething criticism of how the economy really was handled during the UPA years. They've criticized the economy on several counts. And to discuss that and more, we're now joined by Rajiv Kumar, the former VC of Niti Aayog. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us this evening on ET Now.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Sir, So the charge is that the UPA government abandoned economic reforms and failed to check fiscal deficit, while the Modi government is keeping national interest in mind. How do you really read this charge, and what are your thoughts on the white paper that's been presented?
This is a very valid charge because even this morning, I think in one of the articles, paper people pointed out that the response of the UPA government to the 2007-8 crisis was really over the top, and they let the fiscal deficit just completely go out of hand. And then even in 2014, 2009, before the elections, at that time, redoubtable Mr. Chidambaram was in office, and he let the fiscal deficit slip by 2.1%. And after that, Mr. Pranab Mukherjee saw the greatest slippage in the fiscal deficit, which then was reflected in the whopping inflation that you got, double-digit inflation that you got. So this is a valid charge, and the fact that this present government gave inflation targeting as an exclusive responsibility to the Reserve Bank of India actually made a big difference. So and they have kept they brought down the fiscal deficit, and it's remained in control, and now they are on a glide path to achieve 4.5% in FY26. So I think so that's on the white paper itself. It's a good job that has been done to compare the two governments, the economy under the two governments, and some of the criticisms of the UPA the second term of the UPA are, I think, very valid, because there was pretty much lack of governance. The fiscal deficit was ripping through. The current account deficit had risen, and there was kind of all the scams and so on. And then we got into the Fragile Five in 2013, which was really saw very sharp depreciation of the rupee vis-a-vis the dollar. And then the white paper points out that during the UPA term, the rupee depreciated on an average about 5% per annum, while in this government, the depreciation has been limited to 3% or so per annum. So overall, I think the white paper does well to highlight what this government has done in terms of the economic performance and what the failures were of the UPA government, especially its second term.
Right, so you say that it's a crucial step, it's an essential step that the government has taken to highlight their achievements, and how much have they been able to sort of move the economy from the fragile five and now to the top five. But the opposition's been fuming, saying that this special session is purely political, it's a white elephant before the elections, and the fact that they also released a black paper and said that the government delivered nothing but a rise in black money, black future for youth, there was unemployment and price rise.
Well, I haven't seen the black paper so far, the so-called black paper, and so therefore I can't really comment on what they have said. But to say that this government has done nothing at all, and and there's a bleak future for the youth, etc., I think is going over the top. We have to accept that some very fundamental reforms were undertaken during the last 10 years, and also I think importantly, and the white paper I think quite gracefully accepts the fact that some of the schemes that were started during the UPA government, like the Aadhaar card, or like the work done for the GST, or even the work done for the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Act, were actually taken forward in a very much more dynamic manner by the present government, which made use of those things to improve the welfare levels of the people, and to get the direct benefit transfers, to all those who are, underprivileged and at the bottom of the pyramid. So, this government has not been afraid to say that yes, we have built upon what the others left in areas where they were good at, but at the same time, they have taken some exceptionally strong steps, in digital public infrastructure, in the physical infrastructure, in the construction speed of the highways, that you can see in making all those schemes directed towards the lowest segments of echelons of our population, whether it's the Ujjwala or the availability of the houses. I just saw one figure, where they've said that yes, the UPA government did make about 2 crore households for the poor, but this government has already done 2.6 and another 4 in the making. So, everywhere, the comparison does come out as this government having done better than the previous decade. But more importantly for me, the position today that India occupies in the global economy, and that it has become a center of attraction for foreign investors. I think, and the governance, the economic, the governance on the ground, in terms of reducing the regulatory and compliance burden, does mean that the foundations for for accelerated and inclusive economic growth have been well laid during these last 10 years.
Right. So very interestingly, sir, you also mentioned that, due to certain policy schemes like the PLI, there's been ease of doing business. India is now the 3rd largest startup ecosystem in the world from 2014. And we've seen how the ecosystem has really sprung up and has really grown and developed over the years. Exports are also sort of doing well. The electronics and manufacturing ecosystem, of course, is the big highlight as well. But the Congress and the broader opposition maintain that this government forgets the poor and only wants to show broad numbers like the GDP and fiscal deficit. The government says that it has lifted 25 crore people from poverty. The two sides cannot really even agree on employment figures. Does this paper really address these issues?
Well, as far as the transfer of benefits to the poorest segments of the society, whether it is through Swachh Bharat or Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana or the Ujjwala Yojana, or you've got the Pradhan Mantri Kisan Nidhi, Kisan Samman Nidhi, etc. This paper makes those very strong points that the delivery of benefits to the poor has been far more efficient and effective than that in the previous governments, and also the fact that the last mile delivery of public services has also been far more effective. And then, of course, you will remember that this is the only government which covered 500 million people under the Ayushman Bharat medical health insurance scheme. So that point is very well made. Now the other numbers on employment and unemployment particularly, and moving people out of poverty. Well, there is no comparable data. So, there can't be. I can't see how you can reach a converged position, because earlier governments used to draw the poverty line and talk about people below that poverty line, and that poverty line was supposed to be updated regularly. But the present government has, and we in Niti Aayog, did the process because the poverty numbers were not available to talk about the multidimensional poverty, which has got 12 variables under which these are grouped, 4 broad categories and I think 12 or 16 variables. And by that number, and this is accepted throughout the world, because I presented these numbers at the UN when I was in Niti Aayog, and these were accepted even with a large audience there. More than 280 million people have been moved out of the multidimensional poverty. So while the numbers may not be comparable, it's clear that the benefits of growth have reached the bottom of the pyramid, because this is also the philosophy of the present government, which is driven by Deen Dayal Upadhyay ji's Antyodaya program, and reaching the benefit to the last person in the queue. So yes, there is some there is, of course, a sharp divergence of view on figures like unemployment, and maybe also on our sort of foreign trade, etc. But nonetheless, the improvement in the life of the people in general and especially those at the bottom of the pyramid, is just undeniable.
Thank you very much for joining us this evening on ET Now. So, actually, you're saying that this government's biggest legacy has been an inclusive growth. This is something that, the government and its ministers have stated on numerous accounts, direct benefit transfers, of course, UPI and the digital public infrastructure of the country really making sure that the benefits really accrue to the smallest possible unit. Let's now go across to the Parliament and see what Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman had to say on presenting this white paper.
By the sovereign wealth funds and pension funds, the investments being made in India by the sovereign wealth funds and pension funds also attracted some benefits. Those are also, that is, if they invest in infrastructure sector, they are also getting extended till 31st March 2025. And the last one, which is of very important consequence for middle class, small taxpayers, and that is a very big issue which I want to highlight. It is proposed, sir, to remit small unverified demands up to 25,000 rupees, 25,000 rupees, which relate to financial year 2009-10 and also earlier years. Just to remind honorable members that some months ago, there were a lot of discussion about some tax claims are being...
In the beginning,